We have two special guests on the screen with us right now, but if you look around the Zoom room, you'll find a number of new faces. I want to encourage everybody from wherever you are on the planet to, in the chat, say hello and greet each other. So we've got an international community joining us together for today's topic. And today's topic, I think you're going to find really useful and relevant. Many of us have been developing skills of nature journaling, and this is something that we do. We often think of I'm going to do this on my own and maybe share some nature journal sketches and pages with friends. The skill set that you're developing, though, has really profound applications for communicating with other people and helping other people understand important events and how they can engage with environmental issues in their own area. The nature journal pages which we make can be a very effective tool for communicating. And we're going to, and my guest, Katie Bauda, has really helped me think about how to view the purposes of what we're doing in different ways. So is going to really help us be able to take action through our nature journals. We also have a special guest, Katta Ludynia, who is and Dr. Katta is a renowned marine biologist and seabird conservationist. She spearheads the research department at a foundation focused on marine conservation, and her team is committed to examining the consequences of fishing activities and dwindling fish stocks on African penguins and other seabirds population dynamics. So there's currently litigation going on against the Minister of Environment in South Africa about inadequate protection of African penguins' foraging areas. Her research activities include marking African penguins for long-term survival analysis, monitoring populations, including the use of acoustics, and marine conservation. She was a Penguin International Scientist Spotlight for 2023. And we are really delighted to have both of you with us today. What we're going to be doing is, I want everybody to, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking a look at this conservation issue in South Africa. We're going to be thinking about how can we create and be able to share, using our journaling skills, information about this to help educate people about what's going on. And what we also want to be doing is thinking about how what we're doing here with these South African penguins can tie into conservation issues in our own backyard. So we can use some of these same techniques and skills to do exactly the same thing, which we're going to be doing today with our friends, the penguins, in other places. So thank you both for being here, for getting us started. Katie, would you give us a little bit of a background about when you talk about Artivism? What are we talking about, and how does this apply to our friends, the African penguins?
Hey, so I've got a slide about that. In fact, I've got a few. So Artivism is something that I had heard as a word, and I think I'd heard it most strongly from a climate action movement in South Africa called what is it? The African Climate Alliance. And the African Climate Alliance is a youth-led and predominantly youth movement in South Africa, mostly in Cape Town, actually. So I thought it was helpful for this week for us to have a little bit of hope. I think we all need a little bit of hope and action. And the idea of Artivism is something, so it came to me from there, and I really want to give a nod to Nicholas Smith for this definition that we came up with as Nature Journaling South Africa. So I feel like anything I've done around this, or anything I do around nature journaling, really comes from and with my community, Nature Journaling South Africa. And it came about last year when I saw the court case in March was launched, and it was like, okay, when SANCCOB and BirdLife launch a court case against the government, that is, the earth has like moved out of its orbit, because conservation organizations in South Africa don't say boo to the government in public. Katta, I think you're very, very careful to be absolutely non-confrontational in public. And I think that is a very deliberate stance and has been for a long time. So to take the government to court was quite a bold and a historic move to do that, as well as the litigation itself being historic. And we've got Kate Handley with us as well, who from the Biodiversity Law Center. So when I saw that, it really just, my jaw dropped. And I had all sorts of feels. And I went straight to my nature journal, because that's where I go for everything, and started sharing that. And so I started using my nature journal, and that's what this has become, using my nature journal, our nature journals, your nature journal, and nature journaling skills to channel observations, thoughts, experiences, and feelings into positive actions for yourself and others. And it's an adaptation of Nicholas Smith, who's an American. He's calls himself, he is an artivist himself, and he's written a children's storybook called The Artivist. So if you want to see how he's addressed that, and he's got just the most beautiful artwork as well. So this is really inspired also by him. And so the thing that I'd like you to do as you're listening and engaging with Jack, and as you're listening to Katta, is to get out your nature journals, whatever you have, and to bring your nature journaling skills and mindsets to what's happening in the next 20 minutes, the next 30 minutes, 40 minutes. And we're going to go, and then we're going to create our own individual pieces of nature journaling artivism that is for the African penguin, that is going to try and stand up for that. And what the process is connecting. So that's using your I notice, I wonder, it or they remind me of, and I feel, and then learning about, and that's looking at, we're going to go through, what is this about? And that's what Jack's going to take us through, that connecting who and what are these about. And then Katta's going to take us through understanding what are the issues, what's being done. And then we're going to get into a little bit later, what support can we bring? What can we be doing as nature journalists to help with this? And in that acting, our nature journals, and in our nature journals, by nature journaling, we're going to look at what is broken, what is wrong, and look at what are the possibilities for healing and making things right. Very simply, is all we need is a message and an action. It's very, very simple. So all the words I've said now boil down to taking the things that are hurting, the things that are angry, things you look at and say, I can't believe this is happening. And saying, oh, but I have something to say. There's something that needs to be said. Here's the message. Here's what you need to be doing. and getting that out there. It's really, really that simple. And then sharing that. So you're going to hear this a lot. Hashtag save the African penguin. So we'll be coming back to that. And the other thing is to remember to be supporting others. None of us are doing things alone. There's a huge amount that's being done, but it's not enough yet. And also to be filling gaps and making connections so that we're strengthening the incredible efforts that people like Katta and not just individuals, SANCCOB and many other organizations have been doing. And I think that's it for me. I'm going to leave it there. This is just one example of an example of Artivism. It doesn't have to look like this. But this is just one picture of going out at the Boulders Colony, having an image, doing an entry with my questions, all of my nature journaling stuff, having hashtag save the African penguin. And that can go out and become a statement of what's actually going on here. What's going to happen? Is this going to go somewhere? And it evokes emotion. So this is one form, but it can take many, many, many forms.
So thank you for that idea. I think the idea of taking action through our artwork, we really need to get that message right now. There are people who are many people are feeling disempowered about their ability to enact change in their own communities. This is one way which we can do that. So what I'd like to do is to share with people some drawing tricks and techniques that I'm going to be using on trying to create my Artivism piece. In doing that, I'll be taking a look at the penguin and how I might sort of center that as a sort of major icon to hook people in. And while we're doing that, I'd love to kind of ask a few questions about the life cycle of these critters and to help us kind of understand a little bit about natural history of African penguins. Does that sound good?
Can I just add
Yes.
one little bit there that I think Katta might help to see where you, and I think we've got also the penguin biologist in the room and Kate Handley as well. And that is that I think one of the things that I understand at the moment as being one of the central focal points of the challenges facing the African penguin is the need for high energy density food. So why is their life, why do they need like really high energy density food close at home?
So I've got Katie sent me a bunch of really great photographs, mostly, if not all, taken by Katie. And I'm going to be using these to sort of draw and demo over here on the side as we are kind of going along. So one of the things which I'm going to be trying to do is to try to make my little penguins look like penguins. And for this, I usually start with kind of a light drawing that blocks in the basic shape of something. And then I'll be working over that in more detail with a little bit more oomph behind my pencil. So for doing this, I'm going to start with just a couple images of the head and face of this penguin, because from whatever angle, we want to see that little penguin face. And what I often do is start with kind of just a light, almost scribbled drawing that shows the overall shape of what I'm doing here. So in this case, essentially I'm making a ball, right, with a little diamond in it. that's going to be where my beak is going to be sticking out. But I'm doing that really lightly over here so that I can then draw over it. There's going to be a zone of dark kind of coming back from the head and beak, which goes around the side of the face. And dark also cuts over the top. So you notice all this detail about the patterns around the eye. I'm completely leaving that out for now, because I'm sort of blocking in bigger shapes. I want to think of an area kind of coming down under its throat, and this dark patch will then drop down even lower than that. So because I'll actually zoom down on this a bit. Because I have this sort of initial penguin face, and sometimes a face is enough to kind of get people to connect and identify with something. Um, I've I've got this sort of this light framework. I can now start to do my detail on top of that. This bird has a fairly blunt bill. And what I'm going to be doing now is just sort of coming along and filling in more details around this. As I'm doing that, um, let's let me ask a couple questions about the sort of relevant parts of the life cycle of these birds. Katie was suggesting that really paying attention to what part of how does the life cycle relate to times that we need really high density, high quality food. What is going on in the life cycle of these birds that really requires us to pay such attention to the sort of the timing of high quality food?
Yeah, so I can come in if you want. So this picture that you see is an adult. So it's an adult bird. It's very distinguished black and white markings. So obviously any bird always needs food, but there are specific times of the year when the birds really rely on these high energy food sources, which are sardine and anchovy. And one is obviously during the reproductive season. So African penguins lay usually 2 eggs. They incubate those eggs for about 40 days. Um, they alternate, so both the males and the females incubate. So while the one is on the eggs, the other one goes out to sea. And because they alternate, sometimes they stay out for several days during the incubation phase. During that phase, obviously, the bird that stays on the eggs needs to have enough food to actually be able to not eat for several days until the partner comes back. So that is obviously the first step. But then once the chicks actually hatch from the eggs, they obviously need food. So they actually stay in their nest and need to be fed for between 70 and 120 days. And obviously, as they grow, they need more and more food. And if a pair has 2 chicks, it's obviously kind of double the amount of food. Nowadays, a lot of pairs only manage to raise 1 chick or actually none of the chicks because of the lack of food that we're going to touch on a little bit later. So yeah, so the breeding obviously takes a lot of food. And then also because the chicks basically need to be fed every day, that limits the area that the birds can actually swim to and reach to get the food that they A need to for themselves, but also to bring back to their chicks. So they're very limited in their foraging range during the breeding season because they can't travel forever and just stay away. So that is obviously very, very important, and that is kind of what we have a lot of knowledge about from tracking studies that we've done, that we know exactly where these birds go while they're feeding chicks. Once the chicks have fledged, basically have gone to sea, they do their own thing. So the parents are not involved with teaching the chicks or anything when the chicks have left, gone to sea. But then there's a second time in the year of an African penguin, where it's very important that they find sufficient food and high energy food. And that is that, I don't know if Katie might have a picture of it, but when African penguins molt once a year, and it's a catastrophic molt. So they literally lose all their feathers and regrow all their feathers in a period of about, yeah, there was one that was about to molt.
Let's see. Sorry.
So basically what they do. uh,
Oh,
Go
one on
back
the
there.
left.
There was one in the one, yeah, the one on the left is basically almost finished with molt. You still see a few little feathers sticking out, but this bird, for example, has now not eaten for possibly 2 to 3 weeks. So basically after their breeding season, they go to sea, when they're basically free of their children, they go to sea and they're trying to eat as much as they can, to really, really get fat. Because they know that basically there's going to be the day where they're going to end up on the beach and they have to stay there for about 3 weeks without being able to eat. So basically they fast while they're changing their feathers. So when they're done with their molt, you often see them, they're really, really, really skinny. And then they go back to sea and then they really need to find food quickly, because they just don't have the reserves to travel large distances to find enough food to actually regain condition. So it's not only during the breeding season when they're raising their chicks that they heavily rely on these high energy food sources, but also before and after molt. So those are kind of the key stages in the life cycle of an African penguin that are very, very kind of important.
So that you first need to be able to bulk up, get enough energy to kind of hang out on a beach. You've got to be able to then, once chicks arrive, you've got to be able to get food to them on a regular basis. And anytime you're in the process of molting, this is also going to be sort of high food demands. Am I kind of getting the right picture?
Yeah, so it's before you mold, you basically prepare for your 3 week fast by getting really fat, and then you fast for 3 weeks and you lose a lot of weight, and um, then you need to kind of be able to regain and have enough reserves to still go to sea, make it through this really cold water that we have here in South Africa, find the fish, and then kind of regain your condition.
So with I'm imagine that when the we don't have enough food for raising the chicks are going to starve. What happens if your food reserves are not sufficient when even if you're an adult and you're trying to molt?
So yeah, so the problem with the adults is that we believe that there are a lot of birds that actually basically starve and die out at sea, possibly mostly after the mold. So they basically still manage to get to a beach. They change their feathers, but then they don't have the reserves to go out and basically survive. So there's different. So obviously, yeah, the lack of food is influencing the breeding success. So they struggle really to reproduce. So either birds don't even get into the condition to start breeding, and to lay eggs, which obviously is also an energetic, important period. But then also, as you say, they often don't manage to raise their chicks. So the chicks often starve. Um, so that is a problem with the reproductive success. So we don't have enough basically new birds coming into the population. But the other problem is that we have basically birds, adult birds, dying at sea, because they're not having enough food. And especially for the young birds. So as I said, the chicks, when they leave the nest, they're basically left on their own. So the parents don't teach them like it is the case in some other seabird species where the adults still kind of travel with the youngsters. The African penguins, basically, the chicks are left on their own. And we know from tracking study that we've done that they travel large distances. They travel several hundred kilometers, some of them from kind of Western Southern Africa, the tip of Africa, to kind of central Namibia. And they are they're young birds. They're not really experienced in basically hunting for fish, so they also sometimes struggle. but also they go to areas that are actually not that rich in fish anymore. So we have basically very few of the young birds even survive their first year at sea. So there's basically different stages where the lack of food is affecting the population. So it's the low breeding success, so low reproductive rates, few new birds entering the populations. Then if the chicks actually manage to survive and leave the nest, a lot of them die in their first year at sea because they can't find enough food to survive. And then if they do actually survive into adulthood, then we have the problem of the birds pre and post molt that really struggle to get their condition and then might just die at sea. So yeah, so it's at all different levels.
The in my brain, I sort of feel like, somebody's got to be watching this. Of course, these sorts of resources would be protected, but obviously they're not. What are could you say maybe that this is maybe a good time for do we want to with slides sort of talk about the court case, or do you
Yeah,
or
I can share some slides to kind of highlight the different threats and how we've gotten to the court case. Kati said it's not what we usually do. Um,
okay.
so yeah, it's been a long process, and I can maybe touch on that. Shall I try
Um,
and share my
yeah,
presentation?
why don't I do this? Why don't I just going to sort of point out a few kind of life's after listening kind of to what you said about the life cycle. Um, it makes me sort of think about perhaps some key graphics as I'm thinking about kind of how to explain this um, visually for people. Um, the So images that I think might be particularly important then maybe are of, um, I like the image of the juvenile because they're just ridiculously cute. And if I'm trying to get people's attention, we're attracted to little babies. Um, Also showing perhaps the bird and the nest. When the chicks hatch, somewhere around here where's that little, oh, there we are. The chicks you can, it might be more appealing to show just the little fuzz balls underneath an adult, um, in an image to suggest that kind of moment of breeding and required parental care, the challenge of feeding them. Um, it also might be good to show, um, is that one in the back there currently molting? That when we see that little bird back with the fluff around it?
With Yeah, so that is also a chick, but it's basically a chick that is turning into a bird that is able to go to sea. So these brown fluff balls in the front are relatively young chicks still. They're just fluffy and cute, but they can't do much except for begging food from their parents. And then they actually, as chicks in their nest, they start changing their feathers. So you see there in the back that bird is losing its fluffy feathers, and underneath it's growing they're kind of bluish color. It's growing the actual feathers that it needs to then, once it fledges from its nest, go to sea and actually then make it into the wild. And then during their first year at sea, where they travel large distances and are far away from where they actually were born, they turn into this kind of brown color. There is a picture. One of the pictures has a juvenile penguin that is kind of already the size of an adult, but is kind of that doesn't have the real kind of black and white striped. It's kind of a brownish. That bird is probably about a year old. So that would have basically left its nest a year ago in kind of a bluish color, and it's literally just the feathers kind of change their color. They get used up by sunlight or so. And then when the birds return after about a year, they are this brownish color, and this bird will now go into molt, and then basically after 3 weeks come out as a beautiful black and white African penguin like the one on the right.
Okay. So um, so images that are suggesting parental care, the difficult sort of being a chick, or this molting might be particularly relevant. Maybe why don't I just do one little kind of demo here with one of these babies, just because they're adorable. We're seeing kind of a bunch of these babies here in a pile. Could you say something about their sort of behavior of the babies coming together? That that sort of the group shot of some of those babies might be
Yes.
an appealing image.
Yeah, so when they're still very small, they're just kind of the parents literally sit on them and protect them from the environment and keep them warm and protect them from predators. But as they grow older, um, they obviously also need more food, and then actually often both parents will go to sea at the same time. So they're basically being left on their own because they had food, and then the next day the other one goes. So they both parents go. And then what they do, they form these, it's called creche. It's like a kindergarten. So they literally kind of get together in these groups, and then you often have one parent, which is kind of the caretakers up. Yeah, that's how it's spelled, crash. And so they basically then are kind of a group together. But it's very interesting to see then when the parents come back in the evening to feed, the parents will obviously recognize each other through calling. So the parents will basically return and call their chick, and the chicks will kind of break away from this big group of chicks and find its own parents and then get fed. And then the next day, the parents go to sea again, and the chicks again will form these creches. So you often see these groups, and they're not necessarily always the same age. You'll see kind of different ages getting together. But yeah, so that is very, very typical.
So that might be kind of an appealing scene, that little penguin group shot. And if you're doing something like this,
So, Jack,
yes?
we've got for the activity, you've got a image for inspiration, and this is the shot we chose. And I've used it for multiple pieces of artivism that I haven't shared because I didn't want to start sharing things until after this workshop.
Oh,
And
you're saying that this individual shot that we're looking at right now,
yes, yes.
I
And
see
if
why it's an appealing one.
yeah, there's probably better photographs of, but obviously there are better photographs of, but this is the one that we have of, and it was taken in July. So if you go now, we weren't seeing any. We went to Stony Point and we went to the Boulders Colony, and we weren't seeing any of the juveniles in creches. But in July we did, and people just, when they see the photograph, you can just see the awe.
Yeah,
and you don't have to draw
that one that's just sort of looking right at you there.
Yeah, and then there's the one that's like looking up, and it's got its beak like pointing up like this, like, oh, I can't take this anymore. Where's the food? And you can, and what I've done with this is I've got the one that you showed before with the little baby's head out of the, like, it's in shadow, that looked like it had been just recently. I don't know, Katta, whether it would have been recently hatched or not, but it looked very, very small. It was really hard to get a good shot of it.
That is
It's
this one.
Yeah, this one. So I don't know how you would tell how old that is. but and made speech bubbles out of them, which is, I know, like really anthropomorphizing, and somebody in my past is screaming at me, but I'm not listening.
Yeah, so some people get really bent around the axle about the sort of anthropomorphism. I've
Yeah,
and I on one level I understand that we don't want to pretend that we can get into the mind of the bird. And
absolutely.
but at the on the other hand, for kind of connecting with these things, um, it's a really useful way of 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 playing. And I doubt that there would be people who would say that, you are kind of misleading, penguins don't speak English. For something like
So
this, what I might do is I have, information about where where this little kind of chick is poking out from the adult's belly. And then what I can do is take that little bit of information and combine it with, could then even do a Google image search for African penguin and kind of look for a sort of slopey side view posture of a penguin, and then be able to put little Junior there under its tummy. And I'm saying like, oh, I can't see any of the detail on it. That's okay. It's in shadow. But as long as that is kind of a high contrast little bit there, that will, I can incorporate that into a larger picture where I can get other reference for what this bird shape is going to be. Um, so in these sorts of things, we can take elements from one photograph and put it together with others. It's just that you do want to make sure you're sticking with the same species. Don't accidentally put an emperor penguin in there. These African penguins, that little stripe across the chest is a really important detail to get in. The pattern around the face, um, that stripy bill. So all of those are things that would make it feel African penguin. And also, each individual has its own little sort of patterns of spots on its tummy. So if you see spots on one's chest, um, you can have a little bit of artistic license with it, but you'll find a bunch of them have kind of those little features that um, are kind of a unique little fingerprint for that bird. So those are some strategies I might use to kind of initially play with some images. Let's now learn more about the court case that's going on. And as we're doing this, I'm going to encourage people to kind of sketch note what we're hearing. So if we get ideas there of things we could bring into the little graphic that we're making, then that will be helpful. So let's bring, yes. So why don't
Okay. I don't know why it is doing this now. Um, okay, let's just go with it.
yeah.
Yeah, so this is basically just to show you what the situation used to be like. So this image is taken by Thomas Pitchak, an amazing South African photographer who's done a lot of work for National Geographics. Um, so the picture that he's holding here is a picture that was taken in, I think, 1906. So about 120 years ago on Halifax Island, where he's standing in this picture. Halifax Island is an island in Namibia off the coast of Lüderitz, in southern Namibia. And you can just see the amount of penguins that were on this island. The picture in the background, which is Halifax Island now, or actually a few years ago, you can see basically what is left of these penguins that we had 120 years ago. Scarily enough, if we would go back now, there would even be less birds because Namibia has seen a further decline. So we have very similar pictures for South Africa from Dasson Island, for example. So basically, a lot of our islands would have looked like the black and white picture 120 years ago and look now worse than what we see in the background. And this is just kind of the most recent 25-year trend of the African penguin population in South Africa. So the black line is basically the number of breeding pairs. So you see in 2000, early 2000, we had over 50,000 breeding pairs. It then dropped dramatically in the early 2000 breeding pairs. In 2010, that triggered the IUCN to declare the African penguin as endangered. But it didn't stop there. So basically, since 2010, we have this continuous decline of breeding pairs numbers in South Africa, which has now just recently in October 2024 led the IUCN to uplisting the African penguin to critically endangered. Critically endangered is basically one step away from extinct in the wild. And it is also out of the 18 wild penguin species that we have around the world, it is the first one who has unfortunately reached that dramatic state. And there are modeling exercises looking at the population that say that the species could possibly be extinct in the next 10 years, so by 2035, which is obviously quite scary. So we now, since 2022, we have or 2023, we have less than 10,000 breeding pairs left in the wild, and that is together in Namibia and South Africa. So the only two countries where this species actually occurs. What you see here in the blue bars is the fish abundance. So basically the fish biomass of anchovy and sardine. And you can kind of see a similar trend, which to us as seabird biologists seems very obvious, the link somehow to fisheries biologists, they kind of deny a direct link between fish biomass and the decline of African penguin and other seabird species. But you can see that, yes, in the early 2000s, there were quite a lot of fish, and the fish biomass has been going down dramatically. So, but the lack of fish is not the only threat to African penguins. So there are admittingly a lot of different threats. This poster here on the left is actually not only about the African penguin. You see there's all different penguin species. That's a poster that was developed by BirdLife International, but it very well summarizes the different threats. So it is obviously the lack of fish, which is partly due to fishing, as depicted here in the top left corner. There's obviously issues with climate change. We touched on that. There's habitat loss. There is oil pollution. We just, I think, over 10 or 15 African penguins that were oiled just off Cape Town here. So there is a lot of threats. For the African penguin, the historic threats here shown on the right was the harvest of guano in the top picture here. So that's basically the penguin poop. So the penguin feces that had accumulated over hundreds and hundreds of years, literally several meters of height of this guano layer, which the birds were actually using to dig the burrows in. So they're basically breeding in their own poop. But it creates these burrows that makes very good microclimate. So they would be basically protected from. Go ahead.
I'm thinking that because of bandwidth issues, it might be good to turn off your camera, and then more of the resources from your stream will go into bringing the better audio. But I think you'll still be able to share that screen but you can turn off your camera. There. So now,
Yes, I can.
Yes, we're good.
Yeah, let's see if that is better.
Much better.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so guano is basically has been used. Okay, guano has been used as fertilizers. So it has been basically harvested in large quantities here in South Africa and in Namibia, as well as in Peru and Chile and other countries. So that has been kind of leading to the first big crash or decline of the African penguin, because obviously, as you can see, the birds would have been disturbed during their breeding, they wouldn't have bred successfully, but also basically their habitat was destroyed. The other historic problem was the egg collection. So African penguin and sold as a delicacy. I have never tried one, but apparently they taste great. I don't know. But luckily stopped quite a while ago. So those are not threats anymore. The lack of guano still has some impact on the breeding habitat. Um, yeah, but there are obviously other threats that have now taken over. And the biggest threat is definitely system. So changes in fish distribution. It's often also linked to climate change. So there is an anthropogenic factor in it. But it is also the competition with the fisheries for the sardine and anchovy, and we'll get to that just now. But Katie had asked me to also touch on the problems of climate change because that is obviously on everybody's minds. So besides the kind of changes in the environment affecting the fish distribution and the fish biomass, it also has direct impacts on the birds, especially during breeding. And I mean, this top photo might also be a great image to use for some of your Artivism and journal entries, because this is clearly a bird that is struggling with the heat. So you can see the adult is panting, it's standing up, it's trying to cool down. The chicks are panting, they're really struggling with the heat. And what is basically about to happen here is this bird will basically decide, no, I'm going to cool down. It's want to leave its chicks basically exposed to the environment, exposed to the heat, exposed to predators. So that is, for example, one of the reasons why we are also losing, besides the lack of food, why we are losing quite a lot of chicks. The bottom picture is actually a bird breeding in winter, which is the normal breeding season for the African penguin, and that nest basically has been flooded. That is actually an artificial nest. So you see kind of a structure around the bird. That is a nest that has been placed there to basically replace the guano that has been taken off. So the bird has protection against theoretically the sun and the rain as well as predators, but still the nest got flooded. So there is a lot of work that is happening to prevent these things, but so climate change is definitely also a factor besides other things like, for example, diseases, avian influenza, oil spills, all these things. But a lot of studies that we have done and a lot of our colleagues have done clearly highlight that the lack of food is one of the main drivers of the current population decline that we are seeing. And it is about these two species, the sardine, which also is called pilchard in South Africa, and anchovy. So those are these energy-rich food sources, fish species that the penguins rely on almost exclusively. And I don't know, the South Africans in the audience will know about SASSI, but SASSI is a Southern African Sustainable Seafood Initiative, which is led by WWF. So it's basically they look at the different fish stocks and they give these different species kind of a traffic light system. So if a fish has a red fish here as a symbol, you should not eat it, buy it, catch it, whatever. If it is orange, you should like think twice. If you really need to eat it. If it's green, then it's basically safe and sustainably harvest. You see here currently sardine is orange, so think twice. Anchovy, it depends on where it is caught and the method that it's caught. However, there are WWF SASSI is currently working on updating this, and sardine might actually move to red because of the very low biomass. So this is also because we always get asked, what can one do? So, for example, following SASSI and I know some of these systems also exist in other countries around the world for your local fish species, kind of, when you do buy fish, kind of buy sustainable fish. But yes, so sardine and anchovy are the fish species that the penguins rely on, as well as many other marine species and other seabirds. But it is also the largest South African fisheries in terms of the catch quantities. It is the second largest fisheries in terms of the economic value. So it is a very important fisheries, and that's obviously where we bump heads. So the seabird biologists, the conservationists want to protect the fish stocks, the fish biomass, to have the fish available for the seabirds. The fisheries obviously want to catch the fish because that's how they make money. So there has been this argument has been going on for at least the last 15 years, much longer even. And South Africa actually did something very amazingly, which is almost a first in the world. South Africa ran an experiment where fisheries for sardine and anchovy was closed for certain periods, usually 3 years at a time, around certain colonies, which were the key colonies for the African penguin, to look at whether closing these areas to fisheries has a positive effect on the penguins. And the seabird biologists have done a lot of monitoring during this time, and we found, yes, if the years that the fisheries was closed in these relatively small areas, the birds had a better breeding success. They managed to raise more chicks. The chicks were bigger. So we could actually show, and the parents had to travel less distances. They could return quicker to feed their chicks. So we could show that it does have a positive impact on the penguins. So we have obviously, as a result of all these studies, asked our government to please put these closures in permanently. But obviously, because there is a very strong industry side, they've obviously been asking the minister to not close these areas because they want to fish there. So this battle has been going on for quite some time, and unfortunately our government is very hesitant to come to a decision or make a decision. So it's always reverted back the discussion to the conservation sector, the fishery sector. There've been several working groups, task teams, whatever, and we could never come to an agreement. So in 2022, actually, both sides, the fisheries industry as well as the conservation sector, asked the South African government to please call an international independent panel of experts to look at all the available science, all the available data, and basically give a recommendation. So this international panel was called in 2023. It consisted of 8 amazing international renowned scientists from anything from fisheries, modeling, economists, seabird specialists, penguin specialists, ecosystem, everything. And they came up with several recommendations. They acknowledged that closing the fisheries for sardine and anchovy in these areas around the key penguin colonies does have a positive impact to the penguins. And they basically recommended that these closures need to be around all the remaining penguin colonies in South Africa, and it needs to be long term. So it needs to be longer than 3 years. It should be up to 10 years at a time. And they also recommended a method to identify these areas that should be closed, and to identify and basically use a trade-off mechanism that basically looks at how we can protect the biggest area or get the most protection for the birds with the least cost to the industry. So that was a trade-off mechanism. So unfortunately, what happened then is that the minister took this panel, and the minister at the time said yes, she will close all the 6 remaining big colonies. Well, there's 7, but the one is already doesn't have fisheries. So 6 that there is a direct competition between the fisheries and the penguins. She will close all 6. She will close them for 10 years. But unfortunately, she did not choose, or she did not apply the method that was recommended by the panel on how to identify these areas. In contrast, she basically closed areas that had been kind of pulled up ad hoc while the panel was being established, which are basically meaningless for the African penguin. So here's an example of Stony Point and Dyer Island on kind of the southwestern coast of South Africa, 2 of our remaining main colonies. And the orange blocks are basically the areas that are currently closed. So you see they're relatively small areas. And as you can see, for example, in the example of Dyer Island, but also in Stony Point, the areas that are inside the solid orange line, which is now permanently closed to fisheries, are not the areas that are where the fisheries actually goes to fish. So there has been never much fishing happening in these areas. So it's basically great. We're closing an area where there was no fishing in any case, so that doesn't reduce the competition. And if we now look, so we colleagues of mine and we all, the entire array of penguin scientists have done these tracking work for now almost over 15 years. So here in the bottom picture, you see the Stony Point colony, and all these gray lines are actually the areas that we know are tracks of individual penguins. So you can clearly see that the birds basically forage mainly east of this orange block. Where, as you can see in the top picture, also is where a lot of the fishing is happening. So all these little black dots in the left picture, the fishing. So basically, the competition is still there, and that is the reason why we have taken the minister to court, because we think that her decision is actually unreasonable. And Kate could come here more. She can also explain it's also unconstitutional because South Africa's government, our South Africa's constitution actually tells the government that it needs to protect its threatened species, and clearly these closures that are currently implemented are not sufficiently protecting a threatened species, the African penguin. So after basically 15 years of research and a lot of fighting, as Katie said, SANCCOB and BirdLife South Africa, two local NGOs, have taken a very bold step of taking the Minister of Environment to court. And we're very grateful to the Biodiversity Law Centre, who is our legal team, without whom obviously we couldn't do this, who do all this work pro bono. And they have been amazing and have been kind of holding our hands through this process and working very hard, because we are all conservationists and penguin biologists and definitely not legal people. So it's been quite a learning curve for all of us. And then obviously for basically everybody, the question is obviously, what can everybody do? And it is a lot about awareness. We actually, Blue Marine just did a study, and it just came out in the media yesterday, asking the South African public how many people actually know about the fact that the African penguin is critically endangered. And it was a shockingly low number of people that are actually aware of the problem. So we're really trying to raise awareness, and that's obviously where all of you come in. And there is this petition. This screenshot is actually quite a while ago. I think the petition is now at almost 30,000 signatures. But you can still sign it if you can try. I don't know if this works to scan the code. Otherwise, I can try and put the link in the chat in the middle of March. And we're obviously trying to get as much attention around the African penguin before the court case. And that's why we are very, very grateful to John and Katie for actually having invited us here to kind of raise this with all of you and see how you all can help us. And yeah, that was basically African penguin conservation in a nutshell. So sorry, that was very quick, but I'm happy to take any questions if there are.
So I saw that thing that said saved from extinction by 2035. So the projection is these penguins could be extinct in 10 years.
Yes, that is correct.
10 years.
Yeah.
This is, and it was shocking to see that sort of map of where the fish are and where the protected zone is. That was,
So where the
that was a
fisheries
map that
is,
was
so that
not
is
designed by a penguin.
No, and it's so yeah, it's the black dots where the fishing vessels actively catch.
Right.
So yeah, so it is.
None of them. So, and the fishing vessels know where the fish are. They're going
Yes.
to where the fish are.
So do the penguins.
So do the penguins. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that it sort of reminds me of that old sort of you know, critical thinking joke about the person looking for their keys in the parking lot, and they're under the street light. They're looking for their keys, and somebody says, "What's happened?" And I said, "Since I lost my keys, where'd you lose them?" "Well, over there on the other side." "Why are you looking here?" "Well, this is where the light is." Um, so they're drawing that line just around an area that fishing vessels don't use and saying, we're going to protect some area for you. But this is an area that they were not using in the first place. This was an area that the penguins aren't using in the first place. That's stark.
Yeah, I mean, in some cases, there are areas that aren't currently closed where the fisheries would have also gone, but still the areas are not big enough for actually to make a meaningful difference for the penguins. Yeah, and obviously one of our worries is obviously that, if we now monitor, if we now continue with these kind of meaningless closures for 10 years and we monitor, and most likely we will not show a positive effect for the penguins, because that's what we've been saying from the start, that they need
Right.
to be meaningful. Then there will obviously be arguments by people say, see, we closed for 10 years, it didn't help, why should we close anything? So yeah, it's basically it will backfire big time for anybody who is into marine protected areas, marine protection, fisheries restriction. So yeah, and that's why we've basically gotten to the very desperate step of going to court.
And if you're going to just sort of, well, keep it like this and monitor it for 10 years, in 10 years, we could be out of penguins.
Yes.
And
And that's
then,
why we also have been trying to raise the urgency, because obviously the more we delay, the fishing season has just started. So we're going into the next year of, fishing and direct competition. And we might get to the point where it's literally too late, where the number of birds have just declined so much that whatever we do, they're not going to recover.
um, so knowing this, we have right now an opportunity to try to, during the course of this class, start or maybe start and finish a little shareable meme to educate people and to bring public attention to this. Um, and so what we're going to do now, so if anybody has any questions, let's type those into the chat. We'll see those come in, and we will uh, we'll ask Katya about this. And so we'll get the answers real time. But what I'm going to suggest that we do is we are going to right now take take 20 minutes to create an infographic, or a meme or a shareable piece of art that you could put on your own social media to begin to share with other people. And ideally, we will finish it within this time period, because done is better than someday I will do this. Um, we'll get some information about the appropriate hashtags to put with this, so that we can launch those up. But um, let's just take some time now to try to do this ourselves. You can do a Google image search for African penguins to get more African penguin images. If you're copying something exactly, so the person can say, like, you copied my penguin picture, you need to get permission from the photographer or artist. However, if you kind of turn the head slightly, so they're like, is that my picture? I'm not really sure. There's a lot of penguins. A lot of penguins kind of look like black and white.
Sorry, Jack.
Yes.
We've got resources for people, so they don't have, we've done that work for you.
Oh, so nice.
So the photos that we put together and shared with you, we have for other people. We've got the one graphic photo for people to look at and say, this is the one penguin I want to draw. We want to really encourage people to use their nature journaling skills. So if it's drawing a penguin and then making the message as a thing, the further the reach, an infographic needs a lot of time, kind of thing. So like you said, what can you do in 20 minutes? It's actually not a lot, but you can do something. So we've already shared sorry, I'm interrupting you. I'm terrible.
No.
Katta never invite me
This
anywhere.
is what we want.
This,
So
so just so you know that there was a question about the petition, and the big thing I think that people can do is to know there's a lot of questions about can anybody from anywhere in the world sign the petition? Yes, anybody from. In fact, there are probably more people from the U.S. who've signed the petition than there are people in South Africa. And for the people who are from South Africa who are on the call on this workshop at the moment, please go out and get more South Africans to be signing up, because we just don't have enough people signing the petition. And that's something that we actually had tried to allow time for. So Jack, just so you know, people don't have to go and search, because in 20 minutes, you're not going to find it.
okay.
And that's my image. Use it, please. And we've got other images. There'll be a link shared. And for each of the topics, we've also got images for you to copy. So if you want to do something around food, if you want to do something around climate change, if you want to do something about litter, if you want to do it about the court case, we've got 5 slides that I can show very, very quickly, so people don't have to go and find stuff about, oh, I want to do something about sustainable food, seafood choices. I put links in the chat for if you're from France, if you're from the UK, if you're from Canada, if you're from the US, here are places where, here are the apps or the things that are used in each country for those.
Right.
So could we just make a quick
So I think some people are probably already getting to work on this. Let's drop those links into the chat again. And did you want to show some of those pictures? I'm starting our 20-minute timer right now. So in 20 minutes, we'll have a chance to share some of the things which we have with each other, and get some further information about the hashtags and things.
So in the things we've talked about, you may have picked up on one of 5 things. Please support SANCCOB and what they're doing. Even though, and Biodiversity Law Center, and you can get if you're in the US, you can get a tax-deductible certificate for the support you provide to them, because like Katta is doing this at 8 to 9 o'clock at night, and she's doing several of these this week. So they're pushing themselves quite hard, and they're having to save more eggs and that sort of thing. So there's the court case, sustainable food options, climate change, and sea beaches. And these are the things you'll see on that Google Drive. So there's one about the court case, and we've got Kate Handley. So if you throw things in the chat, she can answer things. And this gives you some of the key information. You can copy and do screenshots of this and use it, and it gives you the actions at the bottom there. Then there's one on climate change, which gives you also, again, if you want to have an instant infographic, you just screenshot that, and if you want to do that quickly, and it gives you some of the information there. Then there's one on the sustainable food. It also brings in the responsible farming and the Marine Stewardship Council. And then there's 2 things, one's South African based and one's international, on clean seas and beaches. Yeah, so just the resources are there. Have fun, and yeah, humor, lots of humor.
There isn't one right way to do this, folks. Doing something is better than not doing anything.
Absolutely.
If you prefer mostly words, it can be mostly words. If you prefer a central image or a scene, or something, or a little cartoon that tells a story, think of what's going to grab some attention and bring people to a place where they can get involved and take action.
I'm not sure that there is any audio going on right now. At least I don't think so, right?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think everybody's just sort of working on their own projects. I've put this on not just so people are interested in checking in what I'm up to, but the most important thing is what you're making right now.
Awesome. Thank you. One of our participants had asked. It is fun watching you work. I hope everybody's having a good time making their own arts.
Yeah, I think that's the critical thing. If we can get ourselves to be a maker for penguins right now. My general idea is I want to have one of Katie's photos, but I'm going to put two little baby chicks in underneath it. Because who doesn't love a baby chick? And then I want to have behind that maybe that graph showing the decline, and something to sort of saying to help these birds get their dinner. If you want something to be cuter, give it a bigger head.
So there is a question in the chat. If one wanted to share their images, where should they be shared?
So we were hoping we're going to have time, but I'm not sure that we're going to now. So we've already gone quite a bit over what we said we were going to. So you can share it anywhere you want. And to cover that, we were hoping that I'll share our, if Megan or one of the NJSA people can share our email address. There's two options. One, share it now while we're still on the call. You can share it on any social media platform you have. That can be, if you're still using Instagram or Facebook, I know some people will be leaving those platforms. Wonderland is another place you can be sharing it. You can also share on iNaturalist. I've got a link for that. You can. There's a project called Nature Sketching and Journaling, and a lot of people involved in the environment and naturalism do not know about the critical situation of the African penguin. So that's another place, and I'll share that link. And you can share it in more than one place. So, and we've got some hashtags as well. We'd really appreciate it if you would share our hashtag NJSA on it so we can track and see where this has gone. I think we had another one, NJ Artivism, so we can just see where this might be going. We've got some things to share in the and I'll share them in the chat. So you've got lots of options. If you're already on so just to recap, if you're already on a social media platform, put it on your social media platform, whatever that is. Share it with your family, with your friends, wherever and however you can. And you can share the same thing in multiple places. So I'm going to put a bunch of links and ideas in the chat. And then we'll also be sharing on Wonderland, and hopefully with Jack, we'll look at doing something to follow up on this event to get information out.
Let's just do a little bit of a share now, though. It'd be fun to have people kind of hold up some of the things that they have. If you have a page that you would like to be able to show to other folks, I'll show you kind of what I'm thinking right now. So I wanted to have that cute penguin that was above the eggs. Actually, I can do it this way. Yeah. That cute penguin above the eggs. I wanted to have that one above a few chicks. I want to have some text. Something along the lines of that penguin needs to eat, or that something about kind of getting them dinner, and then that something that says that your action. I think that we've basically got 10 years on these guys. So I want to have something there that kind of alerts people, let's take action now, and kind of a link to that. So I want to add some words into this, and then I can put that on put that up on social media. And that is that's what I'm thinking. I had hoped to be able to get those words in by now, but it just didn't happen, and that's okay. What is does anybody else have one or some messaging? By the way, if if I like your messaging better, I reserve the right to copy your idea and put that out there too. So what are you folks
That's
thinking?
awesome. If you use the same message, it just amplifies it.
Yeah. So what are people thinking? How can we? All right. Oh, you have to turn off of your background blur there. Now we get to see your living room. There we go. Oh yeah, what are we saying? Oh, Mister, we need feed to succeed. Do your job. Is mom finding fish full of those big boats? Fat promises empty of sardines, those waters. Oh, little buddy. Then please sign the petition. Protect the feeding area. Yep. That's great. That's great. Oh, that is really fun. We'll be live in 2035. Hashtag save the African penguin. So we all want to have that hashtag in there somewhere. Nicely done. That's fun. What else do we have? What else do we have? You can let's bring in Ed Chadwick from Point Blue Conservation Science. I know Point Blue is doing lots of research with Adelie penguins, and is and you also you're savvy with how to kind of communicate on the internet. So I'm curious to see what you're putting out here.
Okay, thanks. What a great presentation, and thank you for your work on this really important issue. I was lucky enough to be in South Africa, I think this is going to age me, but I think 1995. And so I was looking at your charts.
When you were 12.
Yeah, I was this big. I was just itty bitty. And yeah, it's so heartbreaking to see that chart just showing the decline and how it lines up with the decline in the fisheries. And you obviously have been doing the research, which is what Point Blue does as well. It's tracking where they go, what they eat, when they need to eat, why, and then looking at policies that could help reverse this trend. So, and how amazing that it's part of your constitution that you have to protect endangered species, if I understood it right. So let's make that happen. But here are some pages. So this was just during the talk. That's ignore the cute puffins coming in for a landing. That's another project I'm doing. Don't look at the puffins. So that was just taking notes while you were giving your great presentations. And then and I did that, and I was sort of capturing this heartbreaking chart and some notes. And then what I was working on during the 20 minutes was this page. And, we'll put in the hashtags and where to go. And yeah, good question on where to post these days. I'm still using Facebook and Instagram, and the Wild Wonder site, Wonderland, is that
Yep.
we're calling it?
I'd say for the time being, let's post it everywhere.
Yeah, why not? Keep it going and try to draw people to both your great work and whatever action you want us to take. So it's just so important to educate people and capture their hearts as well. That's what the art can do. And I love the funny captions, the more storytelling part of it, which I haven't really captured here. That's where I'm going to try to go with the puffins is this is the start of sort of a cartoon, but it hasn't happened yet. It's going to happen. So those are just my ideas. Happy to take any coaching on where and how to post and how to elaborate on these. So thanks for your great work.
Great. I love this that you know we can get something out and that you know I think that hand-drawn art really attracts our human attention and it would bring will make people look twice at these things. We'll see. Well, I'm hoping in the next few days a big bump in the petition and also going forward. Let's see what we can do in each of our networks to kind of get this message out there. Thank you, Anne, for sharing that, and also thank you for the work that you and Point Blue are doing on conservation worldwide.
Thanks.
Does anybody else have a page or even an idea for something that you could put in there that will catch? Sanch, let's see. Oh, share the catch. Oh, look at that. Look at this. Okay, so yeah,
Yes, can you?
yes, we hear you loud and clear.
I don't know. I was thinking something kind of punchy and fun, just like, because I don't know. I understand the impulse, but sometimes the like, here's the problem can just bum people out. And then I've had that impulse to be like, well, let me just scroll away from that problem so I don't have to think about it. But this is like, ooh, share the catch. That's fun. I want to share the catch. I was thinking sort of like with bicycles, they always say share the road. And so that's something you can kind of get behind because it really does revolve around the fish. And the fish looks a little bit happier than he probably would be going down the penguin's gullet, but African penguins could go extinct by 2035. Don't let South Africa's coast go quiet because I know they do make quite a racket. And then down here at the bottom, I did have the little hashtags and the link to the petition. Although, of course, in the post, it'd probably be easier just to put a link in there so people could click it. But I thought just having them be looking like they're having a good time would be a fun thing to add.
Oh, that is great. That is really good. I really like it. And also the bold, thick lines will reproduce very well. And sometimes the really kind of skinny lines will by the time you're looking at a little thing on some social media app, it doesn't read. But this will stand up to the size that you are going to be sharing that. That's really cool. And also, doesn't that penguin? I really want to feed that penguin.
Right? You just want to pick him up and give him a squeeze.
Yes, that's right.
Good stuff. Oh, buddy.
That's right.
Cool. Thank you.
Hey, thank you. Right, some really cool ideas there. Let's see what else we have. You can use the raise hand function or just hold up your journal in your screen. We'll see you there and bring you over. Anybody have other wording? Share the catch. That's catchy. Right. So something that I really like about this idea is that it's actionable today. There is an interesting thing in human psychology, and that is that when we feel disempowered, we don't do anything. The reverse is true. When we do something, we feel empowered, and that also puts wind in your sails to do the next thing. Like, oh, I did that. Okay, what else can I do? So doing something like this starts a cascade of little decisions of being active and making little differences. We can have a cumulative impact. If we feel that we can't do anything, we don't do anything. And that's contagious in our mindset and also in our community. The more that your friends see you doing something about this, what do you know? The more that these ideas can spread. So I really want to encourage people to let's take this penguin and let's turn this penguin into a penguin that makes a difference. Let's see here.
Okay.
So would love to bring Katie back on to the two of us, just to sort of reinforce for folks what links we want to be putting in, what any that hashtag is critical, because people go there, it'll connect with this movement. I want to also just say that I really appreciate what you and your community there are doing. I know that you are together with a wonderful team of folks. And I want to send a shout out like this. So things like this that happen, it's not one person. It's a community. So do you have any reflections, thoughts, and ideas, and kind of or critical steps that you want to share for our folks before we close out the day?
So I think just anybody who's still on, who hasn't signed the petition, please take these few seconds to do it, because as soon as you step out and turn off, you'll forget about it. And just thank you all for being here. The people who are still on the call after all this time, wow, that we're just so grateful. I've got a whole the number of people who've been behind this is just it's the whole community, and I really appreciate Jackie for acknowledging that even though it's my face you see, and our study, Yusuf is my husband. He's in the other room because otherwise we can't have both laptops open. And he's part of our community as well. The opportunity to be here is huge for all of us. And I think the next steps for us, we still have to figure out. We weren't sure how this was going to go. And what we do want to do is the court case is on the 18th to the 20th of March. It's going to be heard in the Gauteng High Court, and we're looking at what we can do to take this to another level. I really appreciate that Katta took it in such good grace. I come from an activist background, so I say things as an activist would. And that can be very uncomfortable for somebody who's not in that space. But I really think that this is a good time, like with HIV, where scientists needed to come together. And I'm not proposing the same campaigns, but I think that we won't send Zaki to go to Thailand and bring back illegal penguins or anything. But to really take it up a notch in the kind of support that maybe we can organize. And this kind of platform, Jack, is just amazing. So I think hashtag NJSA, if you're posting that, if you can email us with things you want, that we'll do a big share on Wonderland and on Instagram. If you want to have, and Sonch, I don't know whether I'm pronouncing your name correctly. I have a they, them child, so yay. Yeah. So we'd love to see that if you wanted to share that. and we'll try and do a big thing around that. We haven't quite gotten our heads around it. And we'll have the resources available. We'll be doing more to try and raise awareness. Please look out for it. We'll probably be doing it through our blog and our Instagram. We're terrible on Instagram. We suspect we may not be on Instagram for long. We will be on Wonderland. We just have to see how Instagram is to people we love, and maybe how they treat us. So that's not a very concise answer, but I get less and less concise as the night goes on. So
well, it's very late for you there.
Very late, but I'm just an old lady.
I really appreciate you and your sort of extended team showing up with us and together sharing this information and working on behalf of those penguins. Taking a existing wild colony and letting it grow is much, much easier than trying to reestablish a colony like they're trying to do with the puffins right now, trying to reestablish puffin colonies. If there still are these colonies existing, let's protect them. Let's see those grow and thrive. Those same policies that protect the penguins, protect fisheries, protect our oceans, protect all sorts of other marine resources, and that means a healthy planet. That means that 100 years from now, there are going to be intact systems. So the work that you're doing on behalf of these penguins is also protecting us from the short-sighted human motivation just to harvest as much as we can right now. And short-term, current fishermen will get some coins in their pockets. Long-term, we are destroying the oceans that support life on this planet.
Exactly. And that's exactly why we're doing this. It's because it's not just about one species, it's about everything.
That's right.
I think Avea wants to say something.
Let's bring the mad botanist in.
Thank you. I'll try to.
Beautiful woman.
Thank you, Katie. I'll try to make this quick. If you have friends and family, this is to everybody, if you have friends and family who maybe aren't as passionate about conservation as we are, I want to also make a recommendation. I just found out that Katta was the scientific advisor on this one series that I watched a while ago on Netflix called Penguin Town, and a pretty lighthearted series, but it makes you really care about African penguins. It follows African penguin couples or African penguin babies or individuals on their journeys, and it kind of has a bit of a soap opera feeling to it, but it's really fun, and you wind up rooting for penguins. I'm still half in love with Mr. Bougainvillea. And so after watching a series, because as we talk about with sustained compassionate attention creating love, you're watching more than one episode of the series, which means you're paying a lot of attention to African penguins for several hours. And so when you hear Save the African Penguins, you might instead of just hearing, oh, it's another endangered species where our world is burning down, you might actually be thinking, oh God, Mr. Bougainvillea needs help. I need to save Mr. Bougainvillea. But I wanted to recommend that for if you know people who you want to get interested in that kind of thing, who might not totally be all about conservation yet, get them to fall in love with the animal that needs protecting first, and then when they hear that animal needs help, then they're to the rescue. So yeah, Penguin Town, highly recommend.
Penguin Town. Thank you for the recommendation. So, Avea, thank you for being here and supporting all the logistics in the back room. Also, thank you, Katie, for your participation with this and making and putting the concept of artivism on our radar, in addition to the importance of this specific issue. Katya, we really respect your research and what you have done. I'm going to actually, there we are. The work that you have done to protect and preserve these species. This species. This is really important for us to do. And I also want to send out a shout out and respect to all the people behind the scenes on your team, working together with you to protect these animals and the ecosystem, which they are a part of. In just a moment, we're going to be wrapping up for the day. Wanted to give Katia and Katie any last opportunity for last thought before we close out.
Yeah, I just wanted to say though, it's not me as a person. It is a lot of people, and it is organizations like SANCCOB, BirdLife South Africa, also WWF South Africa. So there is a lot of people that have been working tireless on the matter. So yeah, it is a huge team. And we're very glad to the Biodiversity Law Center who has come on board as our legal team. So yeah, it is a huge effort between academia, NGOs, also our government colleagues. We do have government colleagues with whom we work very closely and very successfully. So there are a lot of people that are, for example, spent the entire day today and late last night rescuing old birds from the beaches, that do work for government institutions that do really hard work. So yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge that it is a huge team of people behind all this. But yeah, thanks for having me, and I'm really looking forward to seeing some of the drawings. I can't draw it all, so I'm very amazed seeing what people just quickly put on paper, and I'm sure we would be happy to share some of those things on our social media platforms as well. So I'll reach out to Katie to see how we can get access to some of them and then share them on our platforms as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Katie?
I think there's been a lot said, and I think between Katta and yourself, I wouldn't want to add anything. Thanks.
Absolutely.
And just, yeah, it's been more wonderful than you could have imagined.
So again, everybody, what you do makes a difference. What we do makes a difference. Your voice matters. And by taking action, we remind ourselves that we have the capacity to do something. The more that, and what I'd like to do is let this project be if you already are really active in your community and things that matter to you, thank you for continuing with this. If not, consider this as a first step into these waters. And when you hit send on that, see how it feels. I want to encourage you to let that be a seed that you water in your life, in your community, in your world, and we'll see what grows of those things. Thank you all. Be well, be kind, stay curious, and let's stand up for the penguins and the people in our communities that depend on us to make these, to do this work. Thank you.
Thank you.